And that's where the Furies are now on stage, and they're going to confront Apollo on stage. So there's a big switch. We're going from the kind of the nearest thing to psychological, namely the hallucinations of the Furies that Orestes is having because he feels guilty for having literally slit his mother's throat face to face. We're going to, and now we're going to see, and in that way, the Furies are sort of psychological forces. They're sort of not, because they're the result of a kind of crime on the part of Orestes, which is not a personal, individual crime, but if it's a crime at all, it's a crime because of the cultural practices that set it up so that he has to kill Clytemnestra. Or, either the practices of the Furies, that he has to kill her because she killed his father, or the practices of Apollo, that he has to kill her because she killed the king. But that was, he was having sort of private psychological reaction to that kind of public situation that in that culture anybody in his kind of position would have. But the next play, when you get to the Eumenides, the Furies are on stage. And that means not that everybody's hallucinating, or it means Orestes is done hallucinating, and what we see are these cultural forces themselves, so to speak, personified by the actual Furies. And the point is, they are actual forces that everybody experiences. They're really there. And so to show them in the play as these old ladies who are really there, that's how Aeschylus wants to convey it. It's a kind of ontological dimension that they're going into. The cultural forces are dramatized, they're on stage, they're going to debate with each other. Everyone sees the Furies because they're the cultural values, because they're the moral dimension of the world that everybody lives in. And then what happens? Well, then we have to talk a bit about the background. I think on and off I've said this, but I thought I would sort of put it together one more time. That by the time you get that Homer is always trying to get rid of the, quote from him, loathsome Furies, because he wants a beautiful, harmonious, shining, wonderful culture, which he helps produce, which he pretty well does it by himself, produce it by, if there is a Homer, and if he wrote the Odyssey. Anyhow, the Odyssey produces that kind of culture, focuses it, holds it up to the people, and hasn't any place in it for vengeance and all the violent things the Furies do. So, and I mean, the kind of things the Furies do are really amazingly awful. We'll get back to that in a bit, because Apollo gets a chance to give a list of how he thinks how awful they are. Let's just say that it's important that things have happened in the culture that we need to know about it, so to speak, in the background, in what the people normally do and take for granted and understand. Because it's 400 years later now than when Homer was written down, and already at Homer you have this move to marginalize and repress the primitive emotions, as he thinks of them, which are the Furies, and the more they got repressed, the more they got harsh and irrational. That is, the emotions got harsh and irrational. The emotions of vengeance, the emotions of fertility rites and castrations, and you'll see this huge, weird list that Apollo has. But anyway, those kinds of emotions got more and more important in the culture between Homer and Aeschylus, and the more irrational and harsh and they got, the worse they were repressed. It was a kind of cycle that was getting worse and worse, because and there didn't seem to be any way out of it. So because this is on 148 where we are now, as far as I mean that's where sort of jumping into it. So I just wanted to read a passage where you can see that the Furies are literally repressed. I mean, they're put out of the picture. They're put underground. They're denied any place in the culture. So they're complaining about that on the middle of 148. We were strong and skilled. We have authority. We hold memory of evil. We are stern, nor can men's pleasing bind us. This is this business of being harsh and violent. We drive through our duty spurned, outcast. That's the repression. Spurned, outcast from God's, driven apart to stand in light not of the sun. That is, repressed into darkness. They say that on again over and over, and I'll pick it up occasionally, because unless you keep in mind that what's the issue is that a certain kind of reaction to what's going on in the world has been denied and not given any expression in any place in the culture, you won't understand why there is this fight going on between the Furies and the new gods, and why it's getting worse and worse as time goes on. So now I think I've seen that. Yeah, okay. So the world of the new gods is represented now by Apollo, which really didn't have a big role in the Odyssey, but he is the most rational and the sunniest and most clear and most articulate and all that God. So he's the wave of the future. He's going to become more and more important as theory and rationality become more and more important. So the new gods, especially Apollo, have become less and less tolerant. Has become less tolerant. They have become less tolerant, and they've tried to get rid of the primitive and the normal the primitive emotions, and giving them no legitimate place at all. But there is a sort of a marginal respect for other worlds. We'll see that later. Athena's still around, and as long as Athena's around, somebody in the pantheon is going to be open and tolerant. And she may be the only one, but she's one I put her aside for a little while. But then, what we're ready to talk about her now, she's got this interesting double character, which is going to make her able to understand both her fellow people in the pantheon, the Olympian gods, of which she's, a close relative of all of them, and them of her. But she's also got a side of her that makes her able to understand. The way I think about it now is she's got this ability to understand other worlds, and that means all other worlds, even really primitive other worlds. The way it's like Homer. I mean, Homer manages to understand even Poseidon, and even Poseidon putting that wall up to destroy the Phoenicians' harbor and so forth. Homer just tells it to you and tells you sort of why Poseidon did it, but he doesn't. He sort of understands it. And Athena is like that. But except for Athena, everybody else, it looks like, in the pantheon of gods, doesn't have any place for the Furies. All of that has got to be spelled out now. She threatens, she's got power, which is interesting in the background. She says she knows where Zeus's thunderbolts are, but what's interesting about her is that she doesn't want to use force, violence against the Furies, for reasons she explains later, and she doesn't want to use logical arguments either, which is what Apollo does. She's got some third thing, because she's neither a man, and the men use these rational arguments, nor a woman associated with the Furies, who are all emotional about the family and so forth, and don't use any arguments at all, just get all upset and violent and so forth. What has she got? She's got a word for what she can do, and it's interesting to see her do it. She understands persuasion, she says. Now, persuasion isn't force, violence, and it isn't logical arguments either, which don't usually persuade anybody, and don't in this play either. So she's going to be the hope. She's going to persuade and negotiate, but she's going to have strength in the background, namely warning the Furies that if they don't pay attention, she might stop being persuasive and negotiating. But the main thing she's not is not like Apollo's priestess, who is so totally upset about them. So you get a contrast. We aren't going back. We did read the Apollo priest thing last time, didn't we? I sometimes don't know anymore after a weekend what we talked about and what we didn't. I thought so. Well, so let's contrast that with what happens when Athena sees the Furies. I mean, the priestess, remember, is so knocked over that she can't even stand up, and she crawls out and she says, I've never seen anything so awful in my life, I don't even know what it is. And Athena comes around on 149, and she says, I came wingless in the rush of speed and so forth. I now see upon this land a novel company, which, though it brings no terror to my eyes, brings still wonder. Well, that's nice. I mean, so she's able to see even the Furies with wonder. That's the cross-world Athena that we expect to and the sort of Odysseus can do that too, because she helps him do it. So she says, a little more at the top of 149. Who are you? I address you all alike, both you, the stranger kneeling at my image here. Who's that? Orestes, right. I just want to have some reassurance that in spite of it's very hard to read, I understand that for you or for me even, that we keep our eyes on what's going on. And now I see upon this land a novel company and so forth, and you who like no seed ever begotten, not seen ever by the gods as goddesses, nor yet stamped in the likeness of any human form. So they're not goddesses. I never noticed that before. Nobody takes them to be goddesses at this point. She hasn't even taken them to be goddesses. She's just keeping an open mind. All the rest of them have said, oh, sure not. Because way later, I hope most of you, have you read to the end of it now? How many have read to the end of it? Hooray, okay. Remember that in the end she calls them goddesses, and she starts to call and talks in we, but that hasn't happened yet, so she doesn't know yet. She doesn't understand what they are. But they're not human-like and they're not God-like in the pantheon kind of God-like. Okay, and who are they? Well, they say, the gloomy children of night. This is the middle of 149. Curses they call us in our home beneath the ground. And why are they gloomy? We're back to that again. That's because they've been marginalized and then repressed. I mean, marginalized is bad enough. That means taken not as centrally important in the culture. And then repressed means sort of pushed out of sight altogether and sort of held out of sight altogether. That's the worst thing that can happen to them, and that's what happens to them. So now, interestingly enough, she's doing the same thing, I've already sort of said this, that Odysseus does. Both of them go from world to world and get in sync with each world, even as bad a world as the Polyphemus' world. Odysseus is ready to try to get in sync with it. So that's why she's going to be able to solve this problem, because she can deal with these weird creatures in a way that Apollo can't. And then there's something else to pay attention to, namely that's very Homeric. I mean, that just sounds like, well, maybe 500 years or so back that this is happening. It hasn't changed much between them and the time of the Odyssey. But there's something very un-Homeric going on that she wants to do. You can't see that she's done it yet, but the cultural practices are obviously moving toward monotheism. She represents the tendency. There are all these different tendencies in the practices. You just have to put up with that. That's how practices are. There's some tendency in the practices to get things more and more harmonized, unified. Remember, the Homeric story is all these different gods and goddesses do their thing and are tolerant of the other ones. They even are tolerant of the calm ones are even tolerant of Poseidon, and the Phaeacians are tolerant and have dinner with the Cyclopses, and everybody gets a chance to do their thing, and nobody tries to harmonize them in Homer. But in Aeschylus, there's a big step toward monotheism. There really is the tendency to get them all to back the same thing and have the same job. And in a way, by the end of the play, she brings about, I think, the first sort of monotheism in the West, at least the first sort of monotheism that we've got in anything. And how she does it and what it amounts to, we have to see. But so now we're ready to, that was background. Now we're ready to jump in where the action is. And that is that Orestes is trying to defend himself from these Furies who are chasing him around, who chased him there to Apollo's temple, but they want to grab him and eat him and suck his blood and crunch him. I don't know what awful things they're going to do to him. And he's hoping to state his case and get the Olympian gods to defend him, because after all, it was Apollo who told him to do it. Now, so we're on 151 now. And he says that he's gotten rid of the guilt feelings. That is, he's done something that wipes the blood away. This is line 450 on 151. He says, long since at the home of others I have been absolved, thus both by running waters and victims slain, I count this scruple, that means this formality, now out of the way. That what has he done? Well, he's gone through the kind of time and, what would you call them? Sort of exercises that get rid of guilt feelings. And that's all he's got is guilt feelings. Remember I said last time, you can't get rid of guilt by drinking certain kinds of water and doing certain kinds of rituals and so forth. But you can get rid of guilt feelings instead of having this horror and panic of seeing himself killing his mother all the time. That fades into the past if he's done all these things. So he hasn't expiated a crime which really he would have to deal with as a fact. And he'd have to go to prison or whatever you do in this early culture to expiate it, like Raskolnikov has to go to Siberia because he killed the old pawnbroker. That's a fact. It isn't just a feeling that he's got. So he's got no fact. He didn't kill anybody. Well, he killed Clytemnestra, but he killed her in the name of Apollo, and he's trying to say that is not an objective guilt. That's just a guilt feeling, and he wants to get rid of it, and he has gotten rid of it. And so now he explains at the middle, a little bit of the middle, I was in exile in the time before this. I came back and killed the woman who gave me birth. Now it says, I plead guilty. That's wrong. I mean, by the way, remember when you're writing your papers, it seems more and more clear to me that you need to go back and check the crucial words you're using, because the translators are just so hopeless. I realize that you might well think, well, why don't I give you a good translation to read? And the answer is, I don't know any good translation. They're all hopeless. They have no idea what's going on. They don't even think that's their job. They just read it and get the words, the balance of the rhythm right. I mean, there ought to be. Somebody ought to actually make and sell and people ought to read something that's translated right. The nearest thing is this book. The books I'm putting on reserve, they're valuable in mine and marked up. Don't lose them. Where it's the official Greek with the English facing it. It's quaint old English, but we don't care about these and thous or not. The point is, it's not trying to write poetry. It's trying to translate the Greek so you can trust it more. I would say that if you had to choose a bunch of translations, trust the one that agrees with you most, but everything else being equal, let's hope it's this one. Now, so where are we? Okay, yes, we got to get this translated. Two things are wrong here. My father was dear. I'm about 2/3 of the way down on 151. You've got to, it's funny, if you get into the right mood, you can sort of think you're solving this like a crossword puzzle. You've got a certain amount of things that you know are okay, and then there's certain puzzle blanks or wrong things that don't fit that you have to figure out what to do with. And I'm reading it so you can learn how to do that. So here we go. He says, now I'm in line about 463, page 151. My father was dear, and this was vengeance for his blood. It will put all that together. I plead guilty, my father was dear, and this was vengeance for his blood. If you read that, whose side do you think he's on? The Furies or the Apollonians? It's Fury talk from top to bottom. He's making it as a speech to Athena, so you can't really know what it is. It's time to fire the translator. I plead guilty is I can't deny it. And my father was dear. What about that? Did he kill did he kill Clytemnestra for killing his father? That's a trick question. He killed Clytemnestra, and she did kill his father. But did he kill Clytemnestra as father killer? As his father killer? No, that would be the furious thing to do. He killed her as the killer of the king, of the highest authority of the realm and so forth. That's why Pylades was there. I just want you to connect up. Oh, good. Somebody, I need help through this labyrinth. Go ahead.
Does he also kill her as killer of her own husband? Because later on they talk about like the covenant of man and wife being like similar if not greater to like.
Good. That's good. You have to ask. He killed her. Let's see what we know. He killed her in the name of Apollo, and whatever that was, and that wasn't vengeance. That's sure, and it wasn't that he was killing her as someone who killed his father. Now, the question is he killing her as, now to say it again, what? Okay, the killer of Aegisthus, her own husband. No, I don't think anybody cares about Aegisthus. Sorry. Oh, that's right. She doesn't kill her. Sorry. Yeah, okay. Cancel the last 2 minutes. Did she kill Agamemnon? Is she being punished for killing Agamemnon, who is her husband? That is, that would mean that it was okay, in fact, required by the new gods that she kill Agamemnon. And that's what you're asking, isn't it? That's interesting.
But the Furies like make comments about like how blood.
That's why they say, well, that's clear. Let's take the clear part first. They say, we don't care about the fact that she killed Agamemnon, if you mean by that she killed her husband, because we don't care about oaths and marriage at all, and that really upsets him. And that's how it looks to the Furies. But now you're raising the harder question. How does it look to the Olympians? What did she, from their point of view, that's right. So if he weren't being killed or punished, and we have to use some general word. If he weren't being punished for killing, if she weren't being punished for killing the king, and we save her from being punished by killing Orestei's father because he doesn't say father when he kills her. We'll talk about that in a minute. She would be guilty of, if there was a system, a legal system, she would be prosecuted under the legal, and she hadn't been killed already, she would definitely be prosecuted under the legal system as for killing her husband or for killing the king. I mean, both of them are legal. Yes, that's right. That's right. At least half the jurors think so. Yes, you're getting ahead of the story, but you're on the right track. Anything else? As long as he's raised these things, I think he asked the right question, and we've got sort of the characters. It'll get a lot clearer in the trial, but that's what we're setting up. But now let's look at this quote again, because it's so outrageous. So we've only discovered that it turns out I plead guilty is wrong, and it turns out that what about my father was dear? That suggests that he killed her because she killed his father. Bad news. We don't want that. But he could have said, I killed a king killer, or he could have said, I killed a murderer. But in fact, the word here gets translated sire, and it turns out there are two kind of terms that get translated father, just real father. That is, your biological father. Don't mind the complications that's going to come around that. There's that kind of father, and then there's sire or lord or whatever you want to call the person whose authority of some sort you recognize. And the poem, I think, keeps them straight. I looked up in the Greek face en face, and there it's sire and not father. And that's what you want it to be. You don't want him to be killing Clytemnestra for killing his father. Okay, so there's another time that comes up, and I don't know if I can just open to it. Let's see. And again, I looked it up, and again, it was the word for sire or lord or something. Well, we'll come across it. Let me get back to my notes. Right? Okay. Yes. So now let's see. Yes, so get rid of the guilty, get rid of the father, get rid of the... Oh, vengeance. And yes, there's one more. And this was vengeance for his blood. Now there you can't really fault the translators. Remember I said way back at the beginning, and it now ought to make more sense to you, that they've only got one word, which can mean a kind of punishment that pays off what you deserve, or it can mean this blood relation where somebody's hurt you personally and killed somebody or hurt somebody in your family, and you're in a fury and go back and do that to them. That's vengeance. And certainly when he uses that Greek word, we have to translate it like just retribution. That is, we have to see the same word. They only got one word, but we know that he wouldn't be standing there in front of Athena saying, one, he was guilty, two, he did in Clytemnestra for killing his father, and three, that he did it in a furious fit of vengeance. So once you have to fix all of that, and now we just fixed all that, so we can. But I mean it as an example. I like that sentence because it's got more, or that two sentences, it's got more wrong with it than I can imagine you could have crammed into two sentences. But anybody, you see what's going on. People look a little bewildered. Are you bewildered? Is this too hard to understand? No? Good. Let's go on then. So, he was emotional. So he was emotional because Apollo used the Furies to motivate him in the first place, but he was not emotional at the moment he actually did it. Remember, that's the a Pylades thing, said, kill her in the name of Apollo, and he did. Now, but there's new trouble on 154. Sorry about this, but today is the day where there's so much complications washed into this thing. This one's a tough one. I have no idea what to think. At the top of 154. And in fact, I'm going to go back and look at the Greek right now because I don't remember if I did, but I'm sure I must have. But so we're looking at, it's called, look what's going on. Let me read you. Is there something bothering you at the top of 154? Remember, you're reading this, understanding sort of what's going on, hopefully understanding more and more about what's going on. Do you understand enough to get upset by the following? You start on line 545 of page 154. Who's talking? The Furies? No, I think. Let's see. Yes, the Furies. Okay. Let man see this and take care. To mother and father and to the guests, welcome, given all rights and so forth. What do you see there? Anything puzzling about that? The guests. I mean, that was Zeus's job and Athena's job to guard the guests. Well, it's certainly not the Furies' job to guard the guests. I have a complicated theory to explain what's going on there, but before I make a fool of myself, this is something you should do too. Before you make up very complicated theories, it's better always to look and see that you're not doing something stupid. So here we are on 545. I must have looked it up, but I don't remember looking it up. Now, where are we? I'm very bad at this. I'm going to turn it over to you, Bill. It's somewhere right in this vicinity, but I can talk about something else while you try to find it. I'm going to go on as if it does really say guess, because I can't imagine my not looking it up. But so what in the world could be going on? Well, something very interesting could be going on, but you have to make it up, and I don't know any place anywhere in the play where I have any sort of support for this. But you got a real problem. I mean, you got to figure out how the Furies came into the business of protecting guests. Well, here's my suggestion: that the Furies are basically the feeling of moral outrage at something. And mostly when somebody kills a member of your family, literal family, your father or something. But it's also moral outrage when somebody kills just some blood relative of yours, because you killed some blood relative of theirs. Fury, I'm going to use this word, outrage, is this violent emotion which doesn't have any place in it for being, rational. It's just a violent emotion. How could the Furies get into the business of caring about guests? Well, suppose the guest were somebody that was very close to you, somebody who was tied up with your identity. It wasn't a blood relative, but it was somebody you cared about. Suppose it was, something that was tied up with your identity could get somebody into a kind of furious outrage if somebody killed them. This is sort of far-fetched, but suppose you really identify yourself as a student at UC Berkeley, and suppose somebody kills some student at UC Berkeley. You could get very upset about it, even though you're no blood relative of theirs, even though you don't even know them. And that's, what is it?
Yeah, they say, have respect unto the stranger.
Yeah, well, that's pure Olympian talk, isn't it? Stranger instead of guest, it doesn't matter. That's in fact the usual translation, that Zeus is the god of strangers. Well, somebody could be a stranger, and still you could have your identity in terms of them. I'm trying to think of an example, like being, but I can make, to make it more immediate. Think of your own example. Something that is so important to you that it gives you a sense of who you are. The extremist case would be somebody you loved. When you loved them, then it would be a question of oaths. And of course it could be, the Furies could say, yes, that's erotic, or that's just pure sex, as I think the Furies would say. But it could be also, let's talk about it as the kind of oath of Hera and Zeus. I mean, marriage being a kind of lifetime commitment, no blood involved, and somebody kills your partner, from whom you have a lifetime commitment and whom you get a sense of who you are. Then it looks to me like you fall into the Fury business. You would be morally outraged. You would be all upset. You would be ready to go after that person and chop them up, the killer. That's the best I can do. I think that must be, I don't know if Aeschylus knows it, but I think that's what Aeschylus thinks is doing. The Furies are too boring, well, boring isn't the right word, too restricted if you make them just mafia types who only care about, literally, the family. I think and it gets clearer and clearer, as you'll see as we go on today, that what the Furies are really upset about is injuries to the person of such a kind that makes them so furious that they would like to beat up, chop up, suck the blood of, and generally mash the person who did it. And it's that mood of a kind of outrage, is I think the right word, that I think the Furies have, and I think Aeschylus knows that even though they always talk about blood relatives, they mean anything that comes, that hurts you to the quick, so to speak, that gets at what's essential to you and destroys it somehow. Yeah.
Does it have to be?
I don't think so. Go ahead.
Can it be just the individual who has a guilty feeling? It's almost like the guilty feeling inside yourself is like the Fury that's destroying you.
There is such a thing, I'm sure, but I don't think Aeschylus can think about that, because he seems to think that this would be something that public, in the sense that at least all the other Fury people could understand. It's too inner, I think. It's too psychological and Freudian. But go ahead, it's your baby.
And then why does Orestes have to make the case that he doesn't feel guilty, or doesn't is trying to be rational about why he killed?
Okay, well, yeah. I see, I guess. Let me see. The trouble, well, I see that there can be, I understand now what you're saying, this inner self, the guilt feelings, what would you say, blame or something that we're trying to find. There could be that. Orestes has that. When somebody has that, now it's complicated. The Furies claim, you're on a sort of half the truth. The Furies claim that if you feel guilty, that's as guilty as you need to be. I mean, whether you're objectively guilty, whether you call in witnesses and so forth, is irrelevant. That's what you're saying. And that's how they want to treat the Orestes case. They want to say, who cares whether he's absolved this? Who cares whether the Apollo told him to do it? He feels guilty, and so he's in our domain to torture him, and you aren't letting us do it, and we're upset. But the other half of it is, yeah, but that's the wrong way to think about it. Not that your wrong way or my wrong way, but it's the whole current Greek wrong way, according to the gods who are running things. They think the guilt feelings just aren't in the right ballpark. That just leads to people doing outraged, furious things and hurting other people, and that's not what we want. So we've got both sides. But you're right, and Orestes is the perfect example. They're fighting over Orestes because he's got very strong inner guilt feelings, and they are really based on something. He slit his mother's throat. Though he didn't do it, as they say in philosophy, qua mother, or qua killer of his father, but he did do this terrible thing, and he has these terrible feelings about it. And the question is how to deal with that. And now we come to this thing. Either he's got to either give in and be beaten up by the Furies, or he's got to do the kind of, well, there's nothing you can do about it. If the Furies are not and somehow fixed, then poor Orestes is going to be beaten up by them. So the whole culture has to change. Because if the culture doesn't change, then Orestes can't get off for having killed his mother, even though Apollo told him to do it, because the Furies will, as they are trying, get him. So that's the point. The point is to make a clear distinction between guilt feelings and being guilty, and claim that you can get over your guilt feelings, but you can't get over being guilty except by going to prison or whatever. This will get clearer later. I mean, I see people looking puzzled. I don't blame you. I can't say it more clearly right now, but I can in a little while. Yeah.
I think also has to do with in all the third part of the Oresteia, it's kind of like the theories and the Olympian gods are fighting for jurisdiction over their power in the human life. And it seems to be that the Furies are trying to argue against Athena that they have more power than Zeus, so they can say that, oh well, our power goes beyond kind of relatives. It also applies to guests, even though they are in the realm of Zeus.
Good.
At the end, the only way Athena can convince the Furies to join her, basically, or to forgive Orestes, is by giving them some space in this new world. Like she says, the Furies ask Lady Athene in page 156, Lady Athene, what is a place you say is mine? And then Athena replies, a place free of all grief.
Okay. Oh. Yeah, good. You're getting ahead of the story, because it's funny how they change, and it's not immediately. But this is almost a kind of joke that's in the play. So let me get there step by step. Do you recognize why I don't want to say that they immediately change? Did you notice that they go right on saying the same things over and over and over? The same things that you put us under the ground, you don't respect us anymore, we're older than Zeus, we have our authority, and every time Athena tells them that she's going to help them out some way, they don't hear her. We'll get to that. Just a second now. So we got the guest thing, and it's strangers. The guest thing shows up one other place, which I was trying to find, but which I haven't noticed. Sooner or later we may find it, but don't try to look for it. It may just show up. Let's see now. So on 154, that's the generalization I'm talking about. The new Furies should not care about guests, but then maybe it's because if somebody's important enough to you and they get harmed, then you get outraged. Now I'm going to go on. The Furies represent moral outrage of any sort, I think. Really, that's the generalization. Of any sort if it involves your identity, whether it's to your family, which is the blood one, to your clan, which is really the sort of mafia family one, to your city, or even period, and or maybe to your college or university. Anything where you're identified with something that gets hurt. And they are always concerned about what is local and never with what is universal and rational. They're concerned with what upsets you most, which is never what's universal and rational, but what's happening in your life to the people you care about, and what's being done to them. Now we're going to move the issue from Orestes, or we'll get back to it with the trial. But right now, we're getting to the whole conflict between emotions, I just stated it, and reason in the culture. There's the way the culture thinks in terms of rationality, meaning everything should be universal, everything should be clear, and we should have, what did I say, consistent and rational. And there are the forces in the culture that say, that's not what's important. What's important is how you feel about it. I mean, you get that in a funny way. You got it here in the time of the Vietnam War, which is sort of helps, I think, maybe to illustrate this. That was back in the 70s. I mean, there were people who thought the Vietnam War was wrong for rational, moral reasons. And there were people who thought it was wrong in some much more personal, emotional way. And if somebody came to give a lecture in which they defended the Vietnam War, then there was a little sub-war between the people who said, everybody has a right to state their opinion, to give their arguments. If their arguments are clear, we can follow we can do what they say, and if not, we can just reject it. And then there were this crowd of people who said, you shouldn't even let them talk. My gut feeling is that this is an evil thing, the Vietnam War, and anybody who gets involved in defending it is an evil person, and we will shut down that lecture. And that kind of conflict was getting worse and worse in the time of President Johnson and around in Berkeley. And you can see then how a culture could just be split over the issue. What trumps what? Your emotional feeling about it, or the good arguments for it or against it. Okay, if that helps, because I just want to say now the thing has been put in that way now. It's really put emotions versus reason. And that's what Athena has to solve. The cultural contradiction between the rational, impersonal, and the harsh, and the emotional, personal, has been building up in the culture ever since Homer marginalized it and squashed it. And so there's nothing now that that they can do about it. They really have to reform things somehow. So I think I'm on 151, or so I say here. Maybe I've done it already. No, Athena sees that. Oh, it's right after the fancy sentence I was reading, the bottom of 151. So Athena says, the matter is too big for any mortal man who thinks he can judge it. Even I have not the right to analyze cases of murder, where wrath's edge is sharp. You realize I don't know what the Greek is, but that's a version of where there is moral outrage. And there are moral, that's sort of confusing. Where there's outrage, she says she has no authority there. And so we have to go on and see what can be done about it. And now, she sees, unlike Apollo, who doesn't see it, that they have their work. Apollo, just to remind you, you have to keep these two gods in mind, because one of them is the clear example of the rational, and Apollo is that clear example. So in 142, he says that he doesn't see what their job is at all. He says in the middle of the page, they say they got an office, they got a job, and he says, an office, you sound forth your glorious privilege. And they say to drive matricides out of their houses. And what if it's a woman that kills a man, and so forth. And then they get into this complicated discussion. But it's the main thing is, Apollo doesn't see that they have any job. And now Athena does. She says at the top of 152, these two have their work. We cannot brush them aside. And if this action so runs that they fail to win, the venom of their resolution will return to affect the soil and sicken all my land to death. Here's the dilemma. Whether I let them stay or drive them off, it's a hard course and will hurt. And so she's going to set up a jury to decide. But notice these dilemmas are really serious. I mean, this isn't the first. I mean, what other awful dilemma was there? This culture is full of practices or ways of thinking and acting that would clash, and unlike the pantheon, they can all get along, And unlike what the mono stuff, which is coming up, they can all be harmonized. They are usually tragic dilemmas. That's because each side thinks they're absolutely right. We talked about that. So what's the dilemma here? It's no longer what's the last, just to remind you, what's the last dilemma that somebody was in where it was there? Yeah. Exactly. I wondered whether anybody would say that. And here you are saying it. Yes, it was exactly like that. If he killed her to get the army doing as he had to do as king and general, then he killed his daughter. And if he was willing to kill his daughter to get his army going, then he's, from the point of view of himself as father and of Clytemnestra, mother, and so forth, doing this terrible thing. So he's got a dilemma, and whatever he does, it's going to hurt. And Orestes has the same kind of dilemma. There are three dilemmas. First, it was over Iphigenia. Then it's over Clytemnestra and Orestes, whether he should kill his mother or because she killed his father, or whether he shouldn't kill his mother because she's his mother. The culture is just full of these contrasts. And Athena has a new idea. But, and by the way, rather on this page, let's go on just where we are. She's going to select judges and swear them in and pick citizens and set up a court. And the Furies are all upset. They say, here is overthrow of all the young laws. What in the world? The claim of this matrix legislation. I looked up and I saw laws. I crossed out something. Old laws and justice. Can you look up this one? Because I don't understand. The chorus is not in favor of the young laws. So what are they talking about? I'm at line 490. The next paragraph is more what you expect from the Furies. We're the angry ones. We shall let loose indiscriminate death, and so forth, if they let Orestes go. And they see, I mean, this is hard to get all across, but don't get lost. The Furies see that they've got something important. If they stopped punishing people who did outrageous crimes, all kinds of terrible things could happen, and nobody would just get away with it. This is what they say at the top of 153. Never more, I mean, if the Furies went away, never more let one who feels the stroke of accident uplift his voice and make outcry, oh, justice, throne powers of the Furies, help. Remember, justice is on everybody's side always. Such might be the pitiful cry of some father, the stricken mother, their appeal, and so forth. And what does that mean? That means that there better be what they call here fear, which is the sense that if you do the wrong thing, you'll be punished for it. So they say there are times when fear is good. It must keep its watchful place at the heart's controls. There is advantage in a wisdom won from pain, and so forth. And all of this is about what would happen. Athena's understand. Let's start again. The chorus is asserting that there has to be some force behind the moral principles in that culture. If there aren't, anybody could just do anything, and all things would be possible. And so, how are we going to fix that? That's the question. There's another thing that's puzzling. This is a little. If you just go a little further down, I'm not sure what this business of. There's the life of anarchy. Well, we better understand that. The life of anarchy is just everybody doing what they please. The life devoted to a single master is everybody sort of in some kind of police state doing what they were told to do. Neither one seems the right thing. Something in between is what we want. And the Furies are volunteering to be the in-between. But they've even had to take up the language of the new gods. What's funny there, the next job for B is, it says, the in-between has the power by God. Let's see, the Furies say, what do you think of this? I will speak in defense of reason, or for the very child of vanity is violence. That's, by the way, not in the Greek. That just stuck in there. But I wonder about reason when I'm now on line 533. I have my own story about reason. You have to make up some story if you don't like what it says. I mean, I think it means they say that they're consistent every once in a while. The Furies. We do what's consistent. And I think that's all they mean by reason. I mean, wow. Well, that's the best way of getting rid of reason. Just the translators throw in these things. Look at that. I have to write that down. You can trust, you have to trust that because it's not trying to make any fancy talk. So, I give utterance to a timely truth. Is that what you say? Wow. You don't all have to think about these translation things in your paper, but if you do, explain what you thought why you didn't think it could mean what it seemed to say, and how you looked it up and discovered that it didn't mean what you think to say. If you can do the same kind of thing on it that I'm doing on it, that's how to find. You can only do that if you have an overall picture of what's going on, and then you can see the places where it doesn't work. That is, things are not happening the way they should be according to your picture. Then you either have to give up your picture of what's going on, which happens all the time, and that's good, that's how you learn, or you have to understand how the translations got it wrong, and no wonder it contradicts, and they don't understand that they contradict the picture. Anything, so you find something more over there? Yes.
Now is the end of all things wrought by new ordinances.
That's the new gods. Where are you? 490. Line 490. Let's look at it. 490. We are the angry ones, but we shall watch no more overworks. We shall let loose indiscriminate death. This is what? Up higher. Oh yeah. Here's the overthrow of all the young laws. Oh yeah, that's what I was asking about. And what does it say? This here is the overthrow of all things wrought by. Boy, that is incomprehensible, isn't it? I don't know what to say. But it sounds here. It looks like here is overthrow of all the young laws, if the claim of this matricide shall stand. You would think here is the claim of all the overthrow of all the old laws. You see what I mean?
About law and that, just what makes this so incredible. Because the Furies do seem to be claiming they are necessary for the young laws, the new laws to work.
Ah, well, that's a good move. I think that's what you have to say. That's right. That is, they are about to say that, and I was going to talk about that if the Furies stay, and there are two bad things that can happen, that they can do, and both of them would destroy the young laws. So there has to be some third thing that the Furies would be willing to do that wouldn't overthrow the new laws. See, two things that can overthrow the new laws is the Furies can make everybody so touchy that they get into moral outrage if you step on their toes or cut them off in an intersection or something. Then the whole culture goes to pot. Or it can make everybody so callous that they will drive like I gather in China, where a friend of mine just came back saying the red light means, the green light means go, and the red light means go for it. I don't know if that's true or not, but I know somebody who was in the hospital for a while because of it. Okay, so where are we? We're back here. They have been building up, so the new emotions, okay. The Furies claim that the new rational laws won't work if they're not based on harsh punishment. Fits right where we were talking. Which is in turn based on moral outrage in the face of crimes. 153. Well, that's where we are. Okay. You need to have some kind of passionate response to a threat to the integrity of social life. Otherwise, the culture goes to pot, and the Furies say we're the ones who do it. Every time there's an injustice, it unleashes a fury. That is, people get furious about it. That you need that. We need indignation when other people do evil. I'm just listing the ways the Furies can talk about this. And when people do something evil, they should be overcome by guilt. Feelings, anyway. That's all that really is important. The Furies have then posed two threats that Athena is aware of. I've already said this just now, but I'll read my notes on it. They could leave, and the new practices without moral outrage would lead to license, that is, everybody doing what they please, because there's no emotional response to crime, and there'll be moral laxness and casual killings. Look on 152, they're saying that. They're saying at the bottom one, that's where they let loose indiscriminate death, and we shall let loose, forget what I just said. It's not worth straightening out. But I do want to, there's something I'm looking for. Let's see. Well, this is all about the young gods again. We're back to that. See, we don't want people to find a way to act at their own caprice over and over again. The parents would await the death stroke of their children's hands. So I was looking for that. If everybody is just totally morally callous, then if your parent has a lot of money and you want the money, you can just kill them. The culture just couldn't go on like that. And Athena knows that. And unless something can replace the Furies with their harsh and violent and irrational, well, I think that's not fair. Their harsh and violent punishments, then the culture is doomed. Because if the Furies turn up the heat, the things will be ruined. And if they turn off the heat, things will be ruined. So that would mean the emotions would remain, but they would get more and more harsh and destructive. And they would lead to civil war. The description of that thing I just described, with all the emotions getting out of moral emotions getting out of control, is on 165. It's described there at the middle of the page when she's telling the Furies, she's got the Furies now listening to her, and she's saying, do not inflict your bloody stimulus to twist the inward hearts of young men raging in a fury not of wine, nor as if plucking the heart from fighting cocks and graft among my citizens that spirit of war that turns their battle fury inward on themselves. That's sort of like his point. That's the self-punishment. Nor let our wars know. Now never mind what's going to happen. That shouldn't happen. The Furies will tell us what's going to happen in a minute. So we still have time, which we can well use. Well, what's Athena going to do about it? You got read to the end now. She's got to have a proposal. She's got to have a proposal that, in effect, gives a new job to the Furies, such that they can still help maintain moral order and fertility and things that they do that are absolutely essential, and yet not go around punishing people harshly and doing awful things to everybody. I didn't ever read I want to read it. The description of what Apollo thinks they are doing now, and I guess they probably are. Where's this about sort of the castrating of young boys and the impaling of people on spears and so forth? Help me find it. A rant from Apollo, who shouldn't be involved in such rants. Nobody can find it? I will find it someday. What page? So there's this whole list of what the Furies do and from Apollo and how bad it is. And it's a list of pretty awful things that they do. Athena has to sort of get them to stop doing that. That's why I want to read it. And turn that energy into constructive things. Here they are, I think. No? Way back there. No wonder I haven't found it yet. Okay, this is what Apollo thinks the Furies do. It's a little above the middle of 141. This house is no place for such as you to cling upon, where by judgment given heads are lopped and eyes gouged out, throats cut, and by the spoil of sex the glory of young men is defeated. I guess that's castration. Where mutilation lives, and stoning, and the long moan of tortured men spiked underneath the spine and stuck on pails. This is, savage culture at its absolute savagest. And that's the part that Athena's going to have to get rid of. Presumably they didn't always behave like that. I'm thinking back at the beginning when I started talking. They've become harsher and violent and more irrational the more they keep saying this, the more they get excluded, marginalized, and repressed, and the more they get irrational and violent and awful like that, the more they get excluded and repressed. So it's a cycle that completely is generating itself, and Athena has got to stop it. And how she stopped it? Well, we just got to that. She's going to appoint a court. And so on 152, she sets up a court of the finest citizens. It's the line toward the middle of the page. And they're going to make the judgment. And then what happens? Well, she goes on, and the Furies continue being upset, and she comes in on page 154 with 12 citizens. I thought, isn't that amazing? That there's the 500 BC in Athens, they had 12 people on their jury, and we have 12 people on our jury. You've seen maybe the movie 12 Angry Men. So isn't that incredible? Well, it would be incredible, except the translator put that in. Fagles has 10 people on the jury. It doesn't tell you how many people are on the jury. The translator should just keep out of it. But these 12 jurors are there, and and it isn't in the Greek, and it doesn't matter. The only thing it has to be is there has to be an even number. Because if it turns out that there is an even number, then Athena gets to cast the deciding vote. And so now we have to see how that works. So she gets ordinary citizens now. That's important. She's not trying to introduce higher moral standards. She just wants to get these two worlds harmonized. And then the court system works in spite of the fact that courts don't normally reach very wise decisions. They don't solve deep moral problems like this one, tearing apart the culture. So you can tell in a way that the jury system's not going to solve this, really. But so Aeschylus is so interesting. He gives you a story about how the jury system will help solve this problem, and then why it won't fully solve this problem, and then why the next system will help solve the problem. But it doesn't quite either. This is this constant ending, which looks like a happy ending, which turns out to be another unhappy thing, which is suffer, but good win out in the end. It is always going on in the background. So here's the happy ending, which doesn't turn out to be a very happy ending. Namely, you get a court. Now, because it's a good thing to have a court. It isn't as if it's a bad ending. It just isn't an ending. But it's a good step. So I'm stealing this now from Joe Tussman, the same guy who understood why you had to sacrifice Iphigenia if you were going to be a general and send these young people to war. Remember, I said he's the only one who understood that. He also is the only one who understands what is otherwise a completely loony court scene. You must have been upset if you were paying attention. I mean, the arguments on both sides are completely wacky, and the conclusion is even crazier. But what do you want from a court scene? Well, according to Tussman, they do reach a decision. No matter how arbitrary and crazy, they stop the fight because somebody just wins, and the culture enforces that. And then the next thing is, if they just arbitrarily won, people wouldn't follow the conclusion. But when you take the 12 people, let's say 12, and put them on the jury, you take normal citizens, so that people will follow their vote because they vote the way normal people would vote. And so the jury's decision is going to reflect the current practices. And that's why they have a kind of authority. The perfect example of that is pornography. How do you decide whether such and such is pornography so you can ban it? Well, you get a bunch of the normal citizens together, and they tell you what they find is pornographic, and that is what's pornographic, period. I mean, there's no appeal outside of what they think, but since that's what normal people think, everybody will be happy. And next, the court doesn't decide in the heat of emotions. How many saw 12 Angry Men ever? Okay, good. Well, the jury system is not it doesn't work when there are 12 angry men. The whole movie is about who is the main guy who saves it? The actor, who? Yeah, Henry Fonda finally gets them to decide outside the heat of emotion, not like in the Furies, but not like Apollo either, with pure universal rationality, but just calmly trying to get the facts, trying to get the feel of the community. And now comes the crucial one, that it really makes progress. They separate the role of judge, jury, witness, and so forth. Why would that be so important in this case? I've purposely listed everything but one important characteristic, because what we want to save is people having to go through the Orestes problem. Who should have killed Clytemnestra for killing Agamemnon? Some legal person. They should have tried her, found her guilty, and then who kills her? Not Orestes. Figure it out. Under the system, we've still got the same system. Who does the killing? If suppose she's sentenced to death for having killed the king, or who kills her? What? Somebody said it. The executioner. Yes, that's very important. That's exactly right. So he goes home to dinner and eats a perfectly happy meal and doesn't feel guilty. He just did his job. And Orestes doesn't have to kill his mother. So now those are four big advantages of the jury system if it works. But it doesn't really work. And that's the next thing. It doesn't work, and that's because, well, everybody's being irrational, I guess. I mean, I can't really explain why it doesn't work. Let's just say that it doesn't work, and maybe when we say it, we'll understand it. We just have time. So the Furies get to state their case again. This is the trial now. And Orestes is cross-examined, and he's asked what the crime is, and he says, yes, he did it. He killed his mother. And he says at the bottom of 155, with drawn sword in my hand, I cut her throat. And then he says, and I did it because she deserved to die. And that's, she murdered her husband and my father too, Orestes says. And then they get into real weird things about what kind of guilt that was. Then the Furies say, it's so complicated. Whether it was okay to kill Clytemnestra, it depends on whether the man she killed was a blood relative. And of course her husband isn't a blood relative, and neither is Orestes, so Orestes can kill her. This is the funny thing at the bottom of 156. I mean, the whole thing is breaking down because of the craziness of the reasons. And he says, he tries to argue that he didn't kill his mother. He just killed a stranger. And why? What's the argument that he didn't kill his mother? Well, his argument is, she sent me away from home, remember, to live with relatives, and that's not a real mother. But then somebody might say, but she's your biological mother, isn't she? And then Orestes doesn't know what to say. This is on 156, and he loses it. He says, I don't know what to say. Somehow she wasn't really my mother. Help, Apollo. What's going to happen? And then Apollo comes out with an answer on 157. Well, you're right. She wasn't really your mother, because nobody really has a mother, because the mother is just the womb in which the seed given by the father grows, and the mother doesn't contribute anything but the environment. So this is what Aristotle believed. This is what lots of people believed until they got it figured out. So it turns out that for this wacky reason, Orestes can claim that he didn't kill his mother, but that isn't going to get him out of anything. And Apollo comes in and gives that argument in a minute. But first, Apollo, there's an important speech by Apollo in 157, where when Orestes doesn't know what to say and passes to Apollo at the top of 157, Apollo makes his big Apollo speech, which I think I read once before. But since it's the only time Apollo makes this kind of speech, I'll read it again. Apollo is going to say, rationality is, remember, universal, and it's period. Let's just read it. I shall speak justly. I'm a prophet. I shall not lie. Now comes this universal, impartial justice. Never for man, woman, nor city, not even for Athens. From my throne of prophecy have I spoken a word except that which Zeus, father of the Olympians, might command. This is justice. Recognize how great its strength. I tell you, follow our father's will. I tell you, follow our father's will, Zeus presumably. For not even the oath that binds you is more strong than Zeus's is strong. So the idea is, finally it looks like that when they vote, what are they going to believe? Well, I mean, the way to put it is, which practices in the background are winning out? You're trying to get emotions and reason together in the trial. When you finally get the trial finished, you've got all these weird arguments about whether who's the blood relative of whom and so forth. But you vote, and maybe if you vote, you settle something. Maybe. So they vote. Did they settle anything? How did the vote come out? Well, let me ask it another way. Which is more important, emotions or rationality in that poor, unhappy split culture? They're equal. And how did the vote come out? Equal, 6-6. So that's pretty unfortunate. It looks like it's not going to solve the rationality versus emotion problem, because it's deep in the culture. You set up a jury, then it's deep in the jury. So the jury is split. Then it gets crazier still. And what finally decides which side it goes to? Athena has to decide. And what does she decide? Well, she decides that she's on the side of the rational. Why? It was crazy reason. She's Zeus's daughter, and and Zeus is a father, but she has no mother. So she's more masculine than feminine. So she's going to vote for the men. So she's going to vote for the rational over the emotions. You think that's going to solve anything? So there's the happy ending, which isn't a happy ending again. It looks like, well, you've got a jury, and it does all the things juries are supposed to do. It settles it, and it gets a group of people all to agree, and so forth and so forth. But when it's all over, it's just expressed the problem. And so that didn't work. And now we have to see what happens next time.